So the Megillah begins like this. We all know it was in the days of Achashveirosh. Achashveirosh ruled from Hoidu till Kush. Now, Hoidu in general is understood as India. As for Kush, it's not clear. The common translation is Ethiopia. There are many opinions, and we'll just leave it as it is in the Hebrew, Hoidu bat Kush. And then the pasuk concludes, Sheva ve'esem meya medina, 127 provinces. So I sent you a text. This is from the Gemara Megillah. Let's read it together. I'll get it myself up. An argument between Rav and Shmuel. What does it mean that he ruled from Hoidu to Kush? Rav and Shmuel, two opinions. Chad Omar, where were these places located? One said, that's Rav. Hoidu b'soifa olam, v'chush b'soifa olam. There were two ends of the world, as further as possible. He ruled over the whole world from one extreme to the other, from Hoidu to Kush. That's the opinion of Rav. Chad Omar, and the other one says, Hoidu v'chush gabe adodeh ha'v'kaim. No, they're actually adjacent to each other. So what's the big praise? He ruled from Hoidu till Kush if the two territories were next to each other. Answer. This is Shmuel. Just like he had control over Hoidu and Kush, which were right adjacent to each other and adjacent to his capital, he had control over the whole world. So the Mefarshim explain, this is the Maharal and other commentaries, a very big thing. They're not arguing as to the geographical location. They were next to each other. The question is, are we highlighting that they're close to each other? Or, because if you go the other way, they are the furthest from each other. That's the argument over here. So one wants to bring out simply that he ruled over the whole world because Hoidu and Kush going this way. The other wants to bring out the quality of his rule. That the quality of his rule, one was bringing out how far the rule was, and the other was the quality that just like he ruled over these near countries very tightly, he had the same control over the whole world that separated the two. Now, by the way, so this is the Maharal that explains that they're not arguing in geographical location. They're only bringing out what does the Megillah want to bring out. One says the Megillah is bringing out the extent of the rule, and the other one, in terms of quantity, he ruled over the whole world, and the other one says Megillah is adding the quality of the rule. He ruled over the whole world, just like he ruled over the provinces that are next to him and close to each other. And by the way, so the Rogatchover says, here we see from the Gemara assumes the world is round. Incredible insight. Because if the world is flat, and they're over here and they're over here, that's it. They can't be both close and far at the same time. How could they both be next to each other and furthest if the world is round? So next to each other is going this way, and further from each other is going all the way around. So this is one of the places in the Gemara where the assumption of the sages is clearly. And by the way, when did the world discover the world is round? It's 1,000 years later or longer. During Talmudic times, the scientific thinking was that the world is flat. It's interesting. The Rogatchover is pointing out. Rabbi Yosef Roz and Rogatchover. Okay. Now, so Rav and Shmuel are the two opinions here. So Rav says there was one end of the world to the other, and Shmuel says they were close to each other. It's bringing out, and again, they're not arguing on geographical location. Each one's bringing out what the Megillah wants to say. So the Rebbe said like this, just one more illustration. Rav and Shmuel, in general, all of their arguments, there's a consistent, each one comes from a consistent position. Rav, when you look at a pasuk, or even for that matter, a Mishnah, Rav always favors the literal interpretation, and Shmuel always favors not the literal, but going deeper, because sometimes the literal raises a question. So therefore, that has to lead us to a not so literal explanation. What's a famous example? Which Rashi brings, after Yosef dies, Vayokem melech chodesh shelo yodas Yosef. So the Torah tells us a new king, a new Pharaoh arose who did not know Yosef. Here too, Rav and Shmuel argue. Rav says, literally a new king who didn't know Yosef and therefore subjugated the Jews. Shmuel says, no, it just means a new king, not literally a new king. He made himself like he didn't know what Yosef did. He chose to ignore how Yosef saved Egypt and therefore went on to subjugate the Jews. So here too, Rav is saying literally, and your king is a new king. But Shmuel says, does it make sense? How could a new king not know the history of Egypt that just happened before? It's impossible he didn't know. The Torah is not saying there's a new king he didn't know. The Torah is saying it's the old king. Knew and that he made himself king he didn't know when he went on a new path. Here too, in our case in the Megillah. So Rav says it's literal. Mahoidavat kush means from one end of the world to the other. Shmuel says no. Why can't it be literal? It goes on to say 127 provinces, and that already means the whole world, so it's repeating itself. Why say it again? Why mention, if the Megillah already said 127 provinces, which is the whole circumference of the world, you don't just identify Hoidu and Kush. Why say Hoidu and Kush? Tell me something else. Hoidu and Kush are close to each other, and he ruled over them with a tight fist. He had the same tight fist over the whole world. So we're not getting, like the Megillah wants to tell us the quality of its meaning. So Shmuel takes it out from the literal. Usually when you say from one to the other, you mean it's a big distance. Here it doesn't mean a big distance. It means Hoidat Kush in a qualitative way. So Rav and Shmuel are consistent in, we're going to choose the literal path or not the literal, what makes much more sense on a deeper level. Good. So we've explained Rav and Shmuel here. Now the question is, why is Megillah telling this all together? Why is it critical in the story to know, end of the result, they're saying the same thing, that A, he ruled over the entire world, and he rules over it in such a way of a complete and tight control. So the answer is that the Megillah is setting the stage to appreciate the miracle. It's incredible how you think what's happening today in the world. You see the connection a little bit. Every country, Mahoidavat Kush. Why are we told Mahoidavat Kush? What's the allusion here? So the Rebbe explained, look at these two words. Hoidu, Hoid Vahoda means glory, light. Kush means dark. Light, dark. What are we saying here? Different countries have different societies. There are enlightened societies. There are more primitive societies. Achashveirosh, the Megillah is going to tell us, is going to be decreed to annihilate the Jews in the entire world. Now, by the nature of things, some countries would go along, some countries would resist. Like we saw in the Holocaust. Some of them willingly went along with the Nazi agenda, and others, like Holland, the Netherlands, resisted. I don't want to comment, but Ukraine was not a country. Even though now is a Jewish leader, and it's very complex. I mean, what God is doing, we'll see. Yeah, well, you're descended from Jews. Not if he's actually Jewish, but descended from Jewish. I'm actually not sure.
Rabbi, only Bulgaria and Denmark save Jews.
Yeah, so there's different, right? There's different. You're talking about the king, the governments.
It's just only because of Anne Frank do we think that. But there was a remarkable majority of Jews who were killed and collaborators in Holland.
Yeah, but I think less than
less, but a tremendous, but a very large number who were collaborating with Nazis.
Right. So all to bring out that there's different societies and different philosophies. So you would think, therefore, such a decree that is going to embrace the whole world. Some countries will go along, some countries will not go along. The Chush, the darker countries, will go along with it. The Hoidu, the more enlightened ones, the more progressive ones, will not. Oh, Megillah is saying no. Rav and Shmuel are bringing out, he controlled everything and tightly, and therefore the miracle is all the greater that even though he had complete control over the very different kind of societies, and they all would have gone along with it, the whole thing turned around. I have to add a little bit a greater depth to this. How does it turn around all in the end? Just by the way, it's also a Chassidish taich. Hoidu is Maida'ani. The day begins with Maida'ani, Hoidu, giving thanks to Hashem. And Chush, I'm not mistaken, which dark is the Aleinu. What's the Aleinu? We're talking about Hashem, his kingdom being established on earth, this dark world, the furthest place of the world. So this is the whole Avodas Hatfilah is Mahoidu Bat Kush. Or as a joke, you finish davening, give a kush to Siddur, and you put it back, and you're ready to take on the world. From Hoidu Bat Kush. Okay, now back a little bit further to the pasuk. Another question. The Megillah could just say the whole world. You have to be told 127 provinces. What's this number? The whole world. There wasn't there Achashveirosh, and he controlled the whole world. You can say Mahoidu Bat Kush would be enough also. And then do the counting, and so find out 127 provinces. So there's a famous Gemara. And the Gemara says like this. I'm sorry, it's a medrash. Where did Esther get the merit to rule over 127 provinces? From who? From Sarah. Sarah ruled, the daughter, the descendant of Sarah. She lived 127 years. So her offspring, Esther, ruled over 127 provinces, 127 countries. What's the deeper connection here? So everybody knows that Rashi brings, the Torah says about Sarah's life like this: 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. Instead of just saying 127 years. So Rashi explains from the Gemara and from the Medrash to teach us to compare all of the different years. The Kulon Shavin Latova, she was virtuous throughout. A person goes to different stages in life. Of course, when you're 100 years old, it's not the same as when you're 20 and when you're 7. So by the way, interesting thing, it says that she was as beautiful when she was 20 as when she was 7. Most guys would say that a woman is more beautiful at 20 than 7, not the other way around. That she was so the commentary say, just like a 7-year-old is innocent about her beauty. When she was 20, she had that same innocence about her beauty. But the bottom line is, Kulon Shavin Latova, all of the years, she was consistent in all of her years as being a tzadekis, as being loyal. That's the hint over here. But now we see the parallel. Achashveirosh has this control of all of 127 provinces from Hoidu to Kush, notwithstanding their different personalities, like the different years of Sarah. He has control, and that decree, everybody's going to go along with it 100%. What caused in the end the great salvation is learning from Sarah. In the end was like this. The Alter Rebbe brings that when the decree became known to the Jews, that Haman, they were facing total annihilation. The Alter Rebbe brings from a Medrash, we don't have it, but it seems many Midrashim didn't get to us, but the Alter Rebbe had this Medrash, that any Jew, and for a whole year they knew, imagine a whole year hanging over your head the sword of death. Like it's one thing that, they come in, you're a Jew, denied or will kill you, you rise to the occasion and we die. But when you have a whole year to think about it, and if you renounce your faith, you're exempt. Any Jew that said he renounces his faith was not part of the decree. And if you have a whole year to think about this, nobody did. And of course, there are different levels of Eden. And we know what many had sunk into. In the story of how did the whole Megillah begin? And the Gemara asks, why did this even happen? This terrible decree? Because they were invited to Achashveirosh's feast, and they benefited from the feast of this great wicked person. And the Rebbe says that they benefit. What's so terrible? They benefited. It's such a terrible crime because they completely felt we don't need Mordechai, we don't need the Eivishter, we're in a wonderful position. We're successful. We're invited to the king's feast. They're eating kosher. The walls are adorned with the spoils of the temple, and they didn't choke over their food. They enjoyed it. They fell very low. They enjoyed it was the whole problem here. You had to, but you enjoyed it because life is now perfect. Mordechai was in government and they're successful and they're invited to the king's banquet. That's one degree of Jew. And there was many other Yidden that didn't fall this low. But here's the point. Everybody, when it came to the crunch, everybody was cool on like soda. Cool on shovin l'toiva. Everybody did not renounce the Yiddishkeit. And that, in the end, was the merit by which Achashveirosh, the opposite of Achashveirosh's complete control, that they all would have gone along with this, in the end, it was upended because the Yidden universally expressed that essential Jewish spark equally. And that's why Siddur says we find the term Yehudim, the Jews are called Yehudim, is the first time in the Megillah. Because really Yehuda is really one of the 12 tribes. Why are they called Yehudim? So there's the historical reason, because we're all descendants mainly of Yehuda because the 10 tribes were lost. But Yehuda, as we learned in the previous occasions, brings out the Pintel Yid. Hoidu, Hapam Moida Ani, I'm yours. Submission. This Pintel Yid was expressed by every Jew, and that in the end is the tshuva. That's what the tshuva came from there, and that in the end was Mavatal, the Gzeira of the terrible decree of Haman. So all of this is hinted to in the opening verse of the pasuk. And one more thing, interesting question and answer. Why does it start this way? There was the days of Achashveirosh, and then the whole story unfolds from there. Make a contrast. The story of Golas Mitzrayim doesn't start over here. It was the days of Paroi, and the Yidden were in the. You start with Paroi. You start with the Jews there, and you find out in the story that got down to Mitzrayim and Paroi. You should start with there was a Jew called Mordechai. Yidden were living in Shushan Abira, and this happened. And then the story unfolds. You find out that there's the king. Why does it start? Why is that the opening words? So the Rabbi says we have a principle that says Vayihi. Whenever the Torah uses the word Vayihi, it's always bad news. The opening words Vayihi b'mei Achashveirosh. At the beginning of the story, things are wonderful, as I just told you. They're wonderful. Jews are living, prospering, and actually, in the very beginning, Esther is the queen. Mordechai is an advisor. The Megillah is saying, Vayihi, we're in Golos, don't get comfortable in Golos. It's a message here, the words. Nobody was ever comfortable in Mitzrayim. From the get-go, as soon as the exile began, it was terrible. Not so the story of Purim. Things were good. Jews were prospering and then successful and so on. It's the opening Vayihi. A Jew should know this is not good. Don't get comfortable in Golos. Vayihi, that's always foreboding. Even then, in the beginning of the story. But temporarily, they were lulled into the sense of everything is fine and good. At the end, when the Gzeira came, so this brought out that resistance where in Golos, where Jews were not bowing down, and the great salvation that followed afterwards. Have a wonderful day. Good to see you, Ari. Ari left. Fred, good to see you.
Shikach, Rabbi.
Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Take care.
Bye.